I always tell people it's not really a should, it's a why. If you have a should, I should lose weight, I should stop eating. It's not going to happen, right? Because you'll start it. It's not a habit. You've got to create a habit. A habit takes 3 weeks to create. My why was so much stronger than my should. My business was doing crappy. I hated living up in the Northeast. I wanted that financial freedom. So that's the why.
Welcome to the show that's focused on helping you to find your freedom through real estate investing, wholesaling, fix and flips, and cash flow properties. Find your freedom today. And now, your host, Brock Collins.
Hey, welcome to the show that helps you to find your freedom through real estate investing. I'm your host, Brock Collins, and today I'm super excited about today's show. My friends Jake Stenziano and Gino Barbaro are with us today. They're going to share their journey about how they're finding freedom by acquiring and underperforming apartment buildings and repurposing them for cash flow. So Jake, Gino, welcome to the show, guys.
Hey, Brock. How you doing?
Happy to be here.
I'm excited to just hang with you guys this morning and talk about your journey. And for our listeners, before you tell us about where you're at today, I think it's important to pull back on how you got started before you were in real estate. So, Gino, tell us first of what you were doing for years, and then Jake, tell us what your profession was, and then how you guys came together.
Well, our story is pretty cool because you don't need to be a real estate professional to get into it. I got out of college back in '92, so I'm sort of dating myself. Went to work for reinsurance accounting and AIG, and I always tell people that's like watching paint dry is more fun than that job. That was horrible. I was there for a year. And fortunately, my dad had a business. We had a little restaurant, and I got into the restaurant business when I was 24 years old. Just got out of it this March. So it's been 22 years that I was there. So I just retired and got into real estate full time with Jake now. So it was a great job, but you know what happened back in '08, everything just crumbled. Everything slowed down. It affected every industry. And even though we were great, my brother was very hesitant to use social media, so we couldn't grow. We had one store, so I couldn't get the reach going. So I said to myself, how can I create value and provide stuff for people where I can get more money? For a job, basically. So I said, you know what, apartments are great. I always had little apartments. So I said, let me focus on that. And then I met Jake back in probably '08, '09. He was doing work out of my restaurant. He was getting catering. He was a drug rep out of my restaurant. My brother introduced
Jake,
me to him.
You were doing drugs out of his restaurant?
I was doing drugs. I was running trays. I was doing it all, man.
I wish it would have been easier, but anyway.
Hey, you start the drug business, you move to real estate, you wise up, all right?
Well, legit, I'm like the Godfather. They got me in, I pulled me back in, baby. So I ended up going with Jake, and Jake will tell you the rest of the story. We ended up buying apartments back in about three and a half years ago, and we wanted to buy multifamily specifically. And we were lucky in one respect that we took action. Jake likes to say he makes it happen. He is Mr. Make It Happen, Jake. Really, I mean, I give him a lot of credit for that. He just does. He makes it happen. He doesn't make any excuses. Basically, it's Memorial Day, right? We're all on this call. I mean, most people want to go barbecue, but we've got work to do today. When you're making money for yourself, there's no excuse to say, I can't do it today. Mm-hmm. Today is another day you have to make it happen because no one's paying you. You're creating your own paycheck. So I was brought up that way, and I think Jake just had it in him. Even though he was a W-2 worker, he really had that in him, and he had that burning desire like I did to create wealth. And we saw apartments as a vehicle to do that. I mean, I didn't want to go around. I was the landlord. I had a couple little properties. My thing was I wasn't able to scale up the business. So I saw apartments as being able to scale the business. And we started with a little 25-unit apartment complex. People are going to say, wow, that's a lot, 25 units. But you know what? That was my comfort level. I knew we could do it. They were all in the same area. They were priced pretty well. They cash flow like crazy. So we just took a chance. That's what ended up happening.
Okay. Jake, what were you doing?
You want to talk about drugs?
Go for it.
So, well, I'm gonna give a big shout out, number one, to a gentleman by the name of Dr. Neshawat. He was probably my first real estate mentor. It was when I was working in Westchester and doing the catering with Gino's restaurant. I was always looking for more. He knew I was an ambitious guy, and he was kind of coaching me. We'd have lunch at his office, and he would talk about other things besides just pharmaceuticals. And he was a big real estate guy. He owned stuff from Florida all the way up to basically the Canadian border. And he said real estate's really the path to creating wealth. And so that starts, you start getting influence like this from people you look up to, and it starts to resonate and starts to create that burning desire. He was mentoring me saying, and I was living in a one-bedroom apartment at the time, C-class apartment, and he was mentoring me saying, go buy a duplex. This was probably the worst or the best advice I never took. He said, because that's what he did. He bought a duplex, he lived in half of it, and then rented out the other half, rent free. So that was the first advice that I got, and I should have taken it. But anyways, we'll get to a little bit. We'll build off that in a minute here. So I started to wise up. I was seeing how the world worked as I got a little bit older, and was realizing, Gino, what are you paying in New York for a property tax right now in your home?
Oh, I'm paying a lot. I'm paying almost mid 26, 27,000 on my tax.
Wow.
It's
okay. So this is sort of what I'm getting at. 6% state income tax, $25,000 real estate taxes. I mean, you're just getting the tax club, right? And I said, how am I gonna make this work here? My job was decent, but it just wasn't adding up. I was making good money, and I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment. So I said to my wife, we need to find an area that has a better cost of living. So we were looking in northern Florida, we were looking in Tennessee, we were looking in Texas. The common thread here between all these places is there's no state income tax. And I said, that's the first thing I'm cutting off. Second area that I looked at, I didn't want to pay high property taxes. We ended up settling on Tennessee. Not settling, we love the area, and East Tennessee where I live now, because one, they have very low property taxes. 2, they have no state income tax. And 3, we can drive back and see our family in a day, drive back to New York. So that was really the best fit for us. So fast forward, it was Gino, when did I move? 2011 or 2012?
2011 you moved.
Moved in 2011, right? Mm-hmm. Moved to Tennessee. Was speaking to Gino, came into the restaurant before I left because I was really working closely with his brother Marco. And I said, as I get down here, I really want to start looking at properties and investing because I knew Marco and Gino were involved. And he said, well, you got to talk to my brother. So literally on the spot, the last time I was in the restaurant, that was kind of like my cheers. I'd go in, have coffee or whatever, hang out, eat lunch. Gino came out. We'd, break out the laptop. He's like, oh, my God, look at this, like $20,000 a unit, right? And this is when things were still beat down, okay? Things were not recovering yet. So I moved down to Knoxville, I have a lateral transfer with my company, and we start looking at these properties, and we're not getting any love because Gino was coached, was mentored for the last few years, was not going to overpay, wanted to buy in actuals. And we're putting in, offers, maybe asking for owner financing, putting in offers that actually worked, and this one broker was just like, you guys are crazy, that's not how you do business down here, and was literally like beating us, like, what are you guys doing? And he was trying to get us to sign this exclusivity agreement, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong here? I've always been a sales guy, always trying to like kick down doors and make it happen, and I was not getting any love. So finally I'm like, this is not working, and I quit pretty much. My wife's like, look, we got to go buy a house, the market's down right now. So we go out, and I spend all my seed money on this really great house. Damn it, why didn't I buy the duplex, right? So anyways, then, we get into the house, and I'm like, and I'm still bored. Because, 40 hours a week is not enough for me. I'm a glutton for punishment. And I'm like, I still got to do something. I got to make more money. I want to make more money. And I'm like, well, Gino, let's keep looking. So this ugly duckling, I called it the crack den, comes our way. And it was 25 units. It was just, old mom and pop property that was not being taken care of and had some very undesirable tenants in it. The great thing about it was cash flowing. Crazy. It was like the numbers actually worked on this. So we're saying, what's the deal? We look at the property. Then we said, well, what about owner financing? They said, yeah. The broker said, yeah, I think I can get that done. So all of a sudden, this was a different broker. We go from being the crazy guys to, yeah, sure, that's fine. It was just, I don't know where, yeah. And so we get into this deal. We do 10% down, 10% owner financing. I actually had to take money out of my 401k to get into the deal for my part of the down payment. I think we needed like $70,000, 75, Gino, was it?
27.
In that range for the down.
I got it written 27 a piece. There's 3 of us, me and my brother and you. And what was great about this deal was, people say you can't get owner financing. You just have to know how to get owner financing. This is a property that the broker actually knew about it. Not many brokers know about owner financing. Jake's a salesman, so you have to sell the broker and sell the person that's buying the property, selling the property, that owner financing works here. You're not going to pay capital gains on your whole hit. You're going to have some, as we call it, mailbox money coming in. And for us, it's awesome. And the bank has to be on board. So the bank that had this property, we were actually dealing with them, and they held us the mortgage. So they knew the numbers on this property worked really well. And, Jake likes to call it the crack den. I fell in love with the property. Brock, when you see a property, you fall in love with it, right? Yep. I keep doing that. I'm not supposed to do that, right? But I just saw such potential in this. They had little cottages all over the place. So, tenants love their space. These guys were paying cable bill for their tenants. There were so many expenses that were overinflated that I knew we could knock it down. They had weekly renters. I wanted to reposition all the weekly weekly renters into regular monthly renters. So it was a process. There was a lot of what we call value adds on this property, which is what you got to look for. I mean, was there deferred maintenance? There was deferred maintenance, but that's stuff that you could take over time. And if tenants see that you're putting the love into the property, they're going to respond. And what do? We ended up getting out all the riffraff. It took about 18 months to reposition the tenants. It took a long time, but it was well worth it. It was a great first property for us. And you know what? It taught us a lot. We're still self-managing our portfolio, and we learned from the ground up. We're in the trenches, as you like to say, with this property.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. Let's talk numbers on that. But before we do, help our audience understand, how long did you guys make offers that were creative and fit for you before you landed that first deal?
Yeah, it was about 2 years, and I just wanted – here's the thing that happens. We busted our chops for 2 years and gave up and then got back into it and finally landed a deal. So that's the most important thing. And I always tell people, it sounds so cliche, but you can't quit. Mm-hmm. You have to keep going until you get in that first deal. Then all of a sudden you see this shift. You didn't have any credibility. You were the new guy on the block, and then now you're in the game. And now the brokers start coming to you because they see that you're getting deals done, and now you're an apartment owner. And there's this whole shift that takes place, and the more and more you get – then they start coming to you, and it's not like, oh, Mr. Broker, please, even though it's kind of like that now because the market's getting hot. It's this whole credibility shift. And we presented very well to the bank. We didn't just go in on that first deal and say, hey, we want to buy this apartment. We had a very thick binder with all our cash flow projections, our whole underwriting, what we wanted to do with the property. So we were very prepared. We weren't just out there, throwing deals out there and not knowing what we were talking about. We really did our homework on this stuff.
But Brock,
so it took. Yeah.
The thing I want to say, Jake, the thing that I think me and you made a mistake on in the beginning was we're chasing everything. We're looking at student housing. We're looking at single families. Doing a lot of stuff. So I think the most important thing that everyone should do is pick a niche. If you want to fix and flip, that's great. Especially in the beginning, don't fix and flip, buy multis, buy a strip mall. Look at one specific type of asset class. We like multifamilies because I think you can do it part-time. You can buy a 25-unit complex, have a full-time job, and do that part-time on the side. And if you can't manage it yourself, you can still hire a management company or a resident manager to help you out. That's one of the allures, one of the attractions of multifamilies. You can actually build a team with this. And when you start scaling up, you can build a team, still have your full-time job, and do it. So one of the reasons why I think Jake and I failed in the beginning was we were just chasing everything. We weren't really laser-focused. And when you're not really laser-focused in life, you don't have a target, you're not going to hit it. We didn't have a target. Then we decided, you know what, let's just stop fooling around. Let's just target apartments and see where it goes from there.
Now, I would imagine if anyone could go out and on their first offer buy a property, but chances are they're going to overpay and wish they wouldn't have bought it later. So the whole strategy, whether it's with houses, commercial, apartment buildings, is to know what you want and to find your value adds, so that with your investment and your improvements and you're repurposing it, you've got your cash flow increased, and plus your equity should be jump pretty good. So it takes a while to pull those out, but like you say, you got a laser target on those things.
And you know what? You said you wanted to talk about the numbers. I think we did overpay a little bit. We paid $600,000 for the property. It was listed for $750,000. It was on LoopNet for a couple of years, also the property. So could we have paid a little less? I think we probably could have paid $575,000 or $560,000. But the key to it was we got in the game, and it gave us momentum. And like Jake said, it gave us credibility. And right after that, we bought a property 3 or 4 months later. Bought a 36-unit 3 months later. So the same broker showed us another property. So it gave us the momentum. And, before we closed on the property, the sellers, they actually fixed some roofs. They did some deferred maintenance. We didn't even know. We did get an inspection, and they're like, you want to fix it for us? So we'll do it. So they had their own team, which is great. We didn't have team members. So they did a lot of the repairs for us. So that was an added bonus for us. But, it's just a matter of starting, just pulling the trigger and picking that first property.
Go ahead, Jake.
I got to ask you a question, Brock. Here, what is this PG or PG-13? This podcast?
Usually PG. So if you can pull back the 13s just a hair.
Okay. Well, I'll give you a little story. I don't know if Gino ever heard this story. Just to give you an idea of what it's like and what it takes to get your first deal. This first deal we did, they commingled their funds with other rental properties they had across town. Okay. So they couldn't give us a real accurate projection or P&L.
Oh.
I went door to door knocking with the owner, asking what do you pay per month, also to verify that there's people in these places, because again, this was not. And we love this place now. The mail lady actually, after a few months, said, "Wow, thank you so much for turning this around," because she was scared to go there before. But it wasn't in a war zone. It was kind of like on the outskirts of town. It was just they hired or they brought in bad tenants. But anyways, so as I'm going around door knocking, I get to this one unit, and this guy opens the door. and he literally is in his boxers. But the problem is he's got a hole in his boxers about this big. And I'm standing next to this lady. How old was she? But she's probably in her mid-60s, right? And she's trying to sit there and have a straight conversation with a guy with a straight face. I just turned around and said, "No, I'm good. I'm sure you're paying." I just turned around and walked the other way. I mean, it was all out there for the world. Guy did not care. This is the type of stuff that you're going to endure to get into the game sometimes. But you got to take your lumps.
Yeah.
And that's still burned into my brain. I have nightmares about this. Okay. So.
Oh, that's
true
good.
Story.
So were those all the buildings in the same LLC, just owned personally and trust, and they didn't have Schedule E's for each of them?
They were so they had one bank account for properties all over town, and I think they probably just owned them all within the same LLC.
Okay.
And that is not
even or in their own name. I don't even remember. It was a few years ago. It was either an LLC or their own name. I don't even remember.
What happens, the IRS now does not like commingling funds between LLCs, and I'm assuming that's what they were doing also. But that's just not the right way to, record keep, because you don't know what one property's performance is doing against the next. So if you have a 10-unit property and a 5-unit property, I would still create LLCs depending on the value of them, just to be able to have that proper record keeping. That if you want to sell the property or refinance it. So we went to refi this property about 2.5, 3 years later. We had all the proper documentation. Everything was on Schedule E's, like you said. So we had our tax returns. So it's so easy to hand everything back to the bank. We want to sell this asset, we can just sell it. And you're checking the performance month by month. So that's one of the reasons why we call them mom and pops, because if you're commingling all different properties, you don't know which one is doing better and which one is doing worse. Mm-hmm. You have no way to gauge your performance on these properties. So that's one of the ways why and it's hard to deal with these sellers, because we stuck in the game. I mean, most buyers are gonna be like, I can't deal with that. I can't even verify the numbers. They're not gonna go knock door to door. So that's one of the reasons why I think we ended up getting this property, is because we had the wherewithal to stick with it and just look at the numbers and try to figure out what they were. And that's I think how we ended up landing it.
I want to talk to you guys about due diligence. And, I can walk into a property and in 5 minutes or less, I can have a pro forma of this, and this, and I'm going to need to throw 15 or 30 grand in this thing. And here's my break. Just chicken scratch my breakdown. That's done. My numbers are almost always on point. But if I walked into a 25-unit building, there's so many different, the boxes are still the same, but there's so many things maybe I would miss. So in doing due diligence on, say, that first building, do you pay $5,000 for an inspector or something to come in and hope that it works out and you negotiate off of it, and if not, you lose the $5,000, or how's that work?
No, we actually have a really great inspector who charges about $20 a door. So if we have, and that was one of the things in the beginning, and this is all about building your team. We shopped and shopped and shopped and shopped and got all these crazy expensive bids for inspections. And, finally we were able to partner with this guy, and on the smaller stuff, he might charge us a little bit more, if say we did like a 50-unit complex or something. But if it's a decent sized unit, he'll come out for 2-3 days, go through each unit and do a full inspection with pictures, identify everything that we need. And then we can put that into a projection, see how much it's going to cost, and say, okay, look, we're about 30 grand. We want rent ready units. There's about 30 grand that needs to be addressed here. We'll go back and we'll have the documentation to the seller and say, look, you guys, you have a big complex over the years. You probably missed a few of these things. This is what we found. And usually most of the time people say that's fair, because it's not like we're making stuff up. It's very well documented, and it's in a very professional report. So my biggest tip or piece of advice here would be just get a really good inspector that's going to be fair. We think $20 a unit is a fair price if you're doing these larger size units, and just make sure they take very detailed pictures and do a professional report. So it's just about team building.
So let me add.
But if you don't buy it though, you could lose that. You could lose that expense. Sure. Okay.
Let me follow that up. Go into every single unit. Don't skip a unit. Make sure you document everything. And like Jake said, those pictures are worth 1,000 words. Because if you're seeing leaks and you're seeing stains, that's something that has to be addressed. If they don't want to address it, you try to get a quote from your contractor. Let them get a quote from their contractor. Meet in the middle. There's certain things on one of the properties that were broken glass. So it was like $300-400. The seller did not want to fix the broken glass. So were we going to complain? I said to Jake, "Do you want to lose?"
Well, I did complain.
Yeah, But you want to lose you want to lose a potential home run over $300. And fortunately we let it slide because you got to get your ego out of the thing. If it works for you and it's $300, basically that $300 was paid back after a week of cash flowing on the property. So you got to take your lumps. If you think it's worth going forward, go forward. The inspection has to be done. You cannot cheap out. On a regular house, you pay about $500. I remember the first quote we got for this 25 unit. It was about $4,000 to do the inspection. We didn't know. We didn't have a team member. This guy wanted to charge us $4,000. This was 5 years ago, four years ago. So that was a lot of money back then. And for Tennessee, it was a ton of money. So we were shopping it around. This guy charged a little bit more. I don't remember how much it was. It was a little bit more than $20 a door. But now on our last deal, we had 150 units. So, you break it down, he's making $3,000 for, and that's still a great price, but he knows he's going to get residual business. He's going to get residual business. So
and every time it's just you hitting that button, you're picking up the phone, calling him, and he knows he's getting the job. And he's doing a good job for us. So it makes it so much easier not going out and shopping it every time because you have that good team member in place with basically fixed rate pricing.
But
And
before
Brock,
you pay that, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, even if you're a contractor, I think it's a good idea because it's like a second verification. Someone else is telling the seller, not you, because I know you know what you're doing. But when it comes from somebody else, I think you have a better shot of getting the money. Because if you're going to say to them, listen, I need $20,000 for this, I mean, you're obviously a conflict of interest because you're the one buying it. So you're obviously going to say, but if you have someone giving you an inspection report with pictures saying this is what you need to get done, let's meet in the middle somewhere. I think it gives it more, credibility.
So the process you use is you'll get an LOI, and everyone kind of agrees on the rough terms of that, right? The letter of intent. Then you'll do the inspection, do some due diligence, and then you come back.
Let me skip you. There's 3 steps to due diligence. The first one is financial due diligence. You want to look at all your numbers. Make sure your numbers pan out. If they pan out on actual numbers, then the second step is to go to your physical due diligence. Because if the financial craps out, you don't want to waste your money in an inspection. Because all of a sudden, you got your guy out there spending $800. So first you do your financial, then your physical. Once the physical works out, you do your legal due diligence, which is the third one, which is checking for COs, checking title insurance, checking if there's any liens on the property. That's the last one. Most of the deals fall out because of financial due diligence, because all of a sudden those actual numbers are really pro forma numbers and they don't work. So just take care of that aspect first and then go to physical after. But I would always at least schedule the inspector because he might be a couple weeks out now because things are really hot.
Right. So
you might have a tight window of 30 days or 45 days. So as soon as you get an LOI, try to get him a couple weeks out after the LOI, and don't start due diligence until you get all the numbers. You don't want to drip drab of a P&L one day, then another document another day. Make sure you get everything. And from when you get that document, the financial due diligence, that's when due diligence starts. That's when the clock starts. So you give yourself a little bit more time to do due diligence.
Okay, so for our listeners right now that may have the money for, say, a 10-20% down payment, maybe can't on a deal they want get seller financing, and it's an underperforming deal, it needs fixed up, needs cleaned up, do you guys look at properties and try to negotiate the seller to give, after you get your inspection back, if it needs $75,000 and to bring it up, do you try to negotiate that so you get that fix-up cost at closing? If you're already tapped, you just bring in private money.
Well, what I like to do, we like to use something called a repair allowance sometimes. So a repair allowance, let's say you're buying a property for $1 million, and you say there's some deferred maintenance on there. You can ask them for a repair credit at closing. That's one of the things you could do. Banks allow up to 3%, and it's great for banks because you're going to get that money back at closing because you're going to put that money right back into the asset. So basically, if it's $1 million property, you say to the seller, can you make it $1,030,000? At the end, at closing, you're going to still have $1 million sale price. So he's going to credit you back to $30,000 in cash. You don't want to take it off the price because if you take it off the price, you're not getting money back at closing. You're just going to get a lower sales price. You don't want that.
Oh, right.
Just raise the price and then take the credit back at closing. I mean, obviously, banks are going to have to want to go on that and do that. I don't see why they wouldn't, because if you're going to keep the money in an escrow account, just tell the banks that, listen, I'm going to give the money, use the money as I'm repurposing an apartment, fixing an apartment up. You're going to be using that money for the asset. You're not going to be putting that money in your pocket. That's one way of doing it. That's one of our favorite ways of doing it. The other way is, at closing, if you want to close at the beginning of the month, you get credited back a lot of the rent. So those are a couple techniques that we use to try to get money at closing.
So let's say that $1 million example, and you say, let's make it $1,030,000.
Mm-hmm.
Does it ever work that if you've already agreed on $1 million and that's really your top number, and you find these things out to say, hey, you still got to give me $1 million, but I want that 30, it's got to come off of that. You see what I mean? Can you rent
There's
credit
two
or your
things. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think you can do both. We've done both, where they actually take money. They can actually fix it themselves. They can take money off the price, and then from that price, just ask them for a repair allowance, because it's a net to the seller. To the seller, he's not taking any money. He's still going to be getting $1 million net at closing. We're just going to be getting $30,000 from him. So you can work it both ways. You can do both if you want. You know.
Oh, okay. So you guys, I think Jake took a temporary timeout from us here, but from where you got started, just the tenacity of going and keeping the wheels going because you wanted freedom. What were some of your secrets when you got no's after no's after no's, and you knew what you wanted? You had to pause and regroup. What was your secret just to keep? I'm going to keep going. This is my freedom. I want to get after it.
Well, you know, I made a lot of mistakes in real estate. One of them was not doing due diligence on my partners. I got burned in a multifamily mobile home park down in Florida. It wasn't because of the deal. It was because of the partner. So I knew this wasn't the most important things that I learned. It's not what you buy. It's what you pay. Right? So you can buy anything. If you're buying it at the right price, you're going to make money. So my thing was, Jake, we're not overpaying for anything, because I've done that. And I'm still holding on a property that I did, and it hurts. And I don't care what anybody says. They think real estate will be able to smooth that out over the years. If you buy something wrong, and you see down here in Florida, it's been 9 years, and people are just getting back to break even if they're lucky. But that opportunity cost that you lose, the expenses to run the property, the headache, the grief, the loss of your time, that's irreplaceable. So I always tell Jake, we're not buying something unless we're buying on actuals. 10% cash on cash. We want a 1.3 debt service, and we want at least an 8 cap in our market for C properties. That's what we're looking for. And now, as you see, cap rates are starting to compress and come down. We're still looking for those deals, because we're not going to overpay, because we have partners we have to adhere to. We want those value adds are going to make our property worth more than an 8 cap once we're done. You just have to stick with it, and you have to keep looking. And it's not going to be one deal or two deals. You know how it is, Brock. You've got to be out there every day talking to brokers. You have to make that relationship with brokers, because down in the South, it's key, because a lot of them have these big assets. They don't get on MLS. They don't get on LoopNet. They're all broker held. These brokers have these big buyers lists, and they shop them out to the buyers who are doing deals. That's how you're going to get deals in this marketplace. So I wanted to get out of the restaurant. I always tell people, it's not really a should, it's a why. If you have a should, I should lose weight, I should stop eating. It's not going to happen, right? Because you'll start it. It's not a habit. You've got to create a habit. A habit takes 3 weeks to create. My why was so much stronger than my should. My business was doing crappy. I hated living up in the Northeast. I wanted that financial freedom. So that's the why. And did it happen overnight? It takes a couple of years. It takes a good 3-4 years. But if you're willing to do that 3 years, you'll be amazed at what happens once you started going. And then it becomes part of your DNA. It becomes part of your repetition, part of your life. It overtakes you, and you can just you just continue with it.
So you were talking about C properties, and so there's A, which are basically brand new. B, how old are Bs? 20?
I would say, yeah, A's are stay away for the most part. They're for REITs, real estate investment trust.
Right.
What they're doing down here, I'm in Jacksonville right now. They're building them up. They're selling them for $110,000, $120,000 a unit. They're great. They have all the amenities, but they're 2 and 3 cap rates. It's just people who are not creating wealth. It's people who are trying to maintain their wealth and trying to get a measly return. And you know what? As the market starts escalating, these properties are going to get cap appreciation. There's very little cash flow. There's very, very little creational wealth there. So that's why we stay away from them. B properties down here in Jacksonville, they can be up until 40, even 50 years old, some B properties. Technically, because a lot of the assets down here are old. B properties are, usually within 30 years and newer, and they're in a great area, mixture of blue collar and white collar workers. Good tenant base. We love B properties, but down here where I'm in Jacksonville, the cap rates are 6, 5.5, 6, so it's tougher to find them. Where we are in Knoxville, it's great. We still bought one in March of this year. We bought it at an 8 cap. It was a great property. C properties, as one broker likes to call them, he calls them crap properties, but they cash flow. C properties are ones that really cash flow. B properties, cap rates between 5 and 7. C properties, cap rates between 8 to 10. A lot of deferred maintenance on them. You'll find a lot of what we call mom and pops on there. We love them because we can actually reposition them. If you buy a C property in a B area, is what the creme de la creme is, because you can actually reposition that C property, which is fix it up and bring it up to the B, because there's B tenants in that neighborhood. That's where you make your home run. That's when you start repositioning and making a ton of money. You buy the worst house in the best neighborhood, I guess, if you want to do it in single family.
Yeah.
You reposition that property, and when you think about having 30, 40, 50 units, then you can see the numbers just start multiplying, and the excitement's there. We love C properties. That's where we started, and that's where I say a majority of our portfolio is. The D properties, I would tend to stay away from them. I mean, they're really management intensive. I don't want to say they're just ghetto properties, but they're rougher neighborhoods. They're even older neighborhoods. I had properties in Rochester, New York. A lot of D areas because a lot of the companies pulled out. There's no jobs up there. A lot of Section 8, a lot of affordable housing kind of stuff. It's tough to make money on Ds because cap rates are great. I always tell people 20 cap is awesome, but if you can't collect the rent, what the heck's a 20 cap, right? And you're constantly putting money into that property. You're constantly upgrading the property. There's constant turnover, so it's very difficult. I mean, you buy properties in Rochester for 10 grand. So what? I mean, it's by the time you end up putting the money into it and all the lost rent and all the lost time, it's a difficult asset to make money on.
So the C properties really sound like they're the best to reposition, meaning clean them up, fix them up, raise the rents, and so you got higher cash flows plus a higher nut that you've built in the property.
Yep.
So after a while of doing C properties, can you then 1031 into Bs that are even less intensive of management and all that?
Yes, and that's what people are doing. I mean, it all depends where we get comfortable. My only suggestion is really try to learn a specific niche. We started out with the mom and pop Cs. We didn't mean to. Then we started burgeoning into it. We really learned that tenant base. We really learned what that tenant wanted. They didn't want the amenities. They don't really want the pool. They don't really want granite countertops. They want a nice, safe, clean, modern affordability. And that's what we provide to them. And once you learn that tenant base, then you go on and like we bought this B property. We just bought it 2 months ago. We're putting in a deck on the pool. We're putting a dog park. We're adding a fitness center. We're consolidating the laundry. So we're adding a ton more amenities that B tenants want. Do they want granite? Not necessarily, but they want a nicer apartment than the Cs do. You spend more money. That's why you cash flow a little less because you have to add these amenities, and these amenities cost a little more money. Your leasing agents might have to be a touch better because they're dealing with a better tenant base. So you really have to know. It's like running a business. You have to know what your expenses are going to be, and that's why the Bs are a little bit they're a little less management intensive because the tenants are better. They tend to pay more. They have better, more secure jobs. So each one has its pluses and its minuses. And, I'm afraid for the Bs sort of because especially down here, you have a lot of A properties coming on the market. So what happens is the A properties are newer, they're shiny. So for let's say $1,200, you're going to get a 2-bedroom apartment. Well, if a B property is $1,000, those B properties might lose a lot of tenants and go to the A properties because they're just upgrading, but they're getting a clubhouse, they're getting a sauna, a cafe, they're getting all the works. So it's very difficult. You really have to gauge your market and see what's going on. And I'm afraid that's what's going on down here because they're getting so many A assets coming on board. The building, boom, after 2008, the building stopped. But 4 or 5 years ago, they saw the jobs coming down here. And as jobs come down, building starts. So it's just a cycle. You have to know what part of the cycle we're in. We're in the expansion part right now. We're not in hypersupply yet. We're in expansion where, rents are still going up, occupancy is still going up, but there's a lot of new supply coming on board. So that's where we are right now. So will Cs go to Bs? C tenants normally tend to stay in C properties. That's the other bonus. They can't buy a house. They can't afford to put that down payment. So if you take care of them, they will be your customers for life.
Okay. Wow. Man, so let me ask you this.
Does that make sense?
It does. So the C properties make a lot of sense, and I've had experience with D properties, and I'm not a fan, and it doesn't sound like you are either. But
No.
C's and B's, those excite me. Now let me ask you this: for our listeners that want to get into apartments, maybe even just a small 10-unit, right, and just get their feet wet to jump in, what's the best advice you can give our listeners on what steps they should take to get that first property? What do they need to do?
Okay, let me try to break it down. What we did is, like I said, you already picked your niche. You want to get into multifamilies. Next thing is you got to pick a market, right? I don't know where you live. In New York, I couldn't cash flow New York to save my life. So I said, where am I going to go? I decided to choose a market. That's the next step. Choose a market where you want to go. I was fortunate that my partner lived in Tennessee, so I had a partner working there. If you can't do it, get on websites like Bigger Pockets, Investor Connectors. See if you can connect with other people who live in a market who maybe have no cash and want to partner up, and maybe you can bring something to the table. See, a partnership is great. You have to have that cohesiveness. Me and Jake are on the same page. He had no experience. I had experience. He had money. I had a lot more capital. So we worked really well. We were both hungry. So if you can't do it yourself, think about partnering with somebody. Try to, talk to people. Try to see if you can raise some money together. Get the deal done together because it's awesome to have a partner because He has problems one day, he can pick up the phone, talk to me, we can hash things out. Two minds I think are better than one. As long as those two minds are on the same page. We're both buy and hold guys. We both want to, cash flow. We both want to work in multifamilies. So think about doing that. You have to pick your market, and then you have to really start building up a business plan, and you have to start connecting with brokers. Pick up the phone, go on LoopNet. Let's say your property's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Pull up LoopNet Chattanooga, Tennessee. See how many brokers there are and what brokers are listing what on in that market. Start calling them. Start telling them, hey, my name is Brock. I'm looking for apartments in your area. Do you have any deals? And tell them specifically, I'm looking for C properties in an emerging market. I'm looking for 8 caps, and my criteria is like I want a 10% cash on cash. Once you start speaking the lingo, you have to learn the lingo. They're going to take you for granted. They're going to take you seriously. They're not going to say this guy's just off the street. He's coming from a seminar, right? That's what these guys do. They end up calling and they end up throwing these stupid numbers in. And let them send you 1 or 2 deals. The first 2 deals, I guarantee you're going to be total crap. So then you say to them, thanks a lot. I really appreciate you bringing me this deal. It just doesn't work for me. I've got my spreadsheet here. You can see as it's showing, I can't, give it to my investor for 3% cash on cash. Then you start building rapport with them, and you just start, going from there. And they'll end up sending you deals. If you have the capital or you have the credibility, they will end up sending you deals that way.
Okay, and that leads me to this. I know you have some training for beginners that you have put together for investors who want to take the first steps but are not too experienced just yet in the apartment side. And so talk to us about the gateway to multifamily, what that is and how it can help our listeners today.
Well, Jake and I put this product together. I think it's important for investors to realize why they're getting into real estate. That's the first question. Why are you getting into real estate? You can get into stocks, you can get into bonds, getting into oil. Real estate is just a vehicle to get you from point A to point B, right, Brock? I mean, people confuse that. It's all about the numbers. So I think it's really important that you understand why you're getting into real estate and why you want to do it. So that's the first step. We put the product together because we want you to figure out your why. 80% of anything is psychological, 20% is mechanical. So once you got your psychological there, you say you can do it, and you're all in, and you have to be bought into any process. Once you're bought in, then you have to start learning the mechanics of it. And this product has a little bit of both. I'm a life coach, so I intermingle both because I want people to be in it. That, if you just say to them, I want to buy real estate, what does that mean? But it has to do with motion. You have to bring it every day. Your level of energy has to be raised. On this call, you see our level of energy is up. We're engaged. We're really, we're in it. That's what you have to be when you're doing something. So that's what this product is structured about. If you think about buying a 10-unit property, don't you think that's easier than doing 10 separate closings, 10 individual houses? I think to buy one deal that you're buying on numbers, that you're getting financed from a bank, if you think about it, stop and think about it, I think it's easier to do that one transaction than to do 10 separate transactions. I think it's cheaper, and I think it's just easier to do. So I think people get overwhelmed by the fact when they hear 5 or more units, commercial lending. It really isn't. Get your education, get out there and find out how to do it, because I think it's, in the long run, it's easier to do. We have the economies of scale. We have one lawn. We have one roof. We have one boiler. We don't have everything spread out. All the tenants are in one spot. So when we go collect the rent, they're all there. So especially when you're starting out, if you want to get some leverage and get some really, economies of scale, a 10-unit, 8-unit, I think it's the way to go.
All right, guys, talk to us about how we can learn more about you guys and your journey and the gateway to multifamily. What's the best way we can reach out to you guys and learn more about how to do this business?
Hit it, Jake.
Well, okay, let's see. We got LinkedIn, we got Instagram, we got Facebook, we got Twitter, and we're on Snapchat, baby. Bring the pain.
I told you Snapchat, Brock. I tell you, he's killing me.
Jake and you got so the handle on all of them is Jake and Gino. So Jake and Gino, ANDGINO. Jake and Gino, jakeandgino.com. Gino, what else?
That's it. We have a great podcast. I mean, that's how we met Brock. I'm so thankful that we actually interviewed Brock. We had an awesome podcast, and our podcast is great. I mean, there's a lot of free stuff. Our website has a lot of free information on there. I write blogs weekly. We're doing podcasts weekly. So, come back and check us out if you want to get into multis. I have an article right now on there that's about the gateway product. So go onto our blog, read it, see if it's right for you. If it's right for you, I think you could just jump on it and just start your journey.
JakeandGino.com.
And it's the Wheelbarrow Profits Podcast.
Wheelbarrow Profits Podcast on iTunes and Google Play.
Yep.
You on Google Play?
We are on Spreaker.
No, Spreaker and SoundCloud, and there's another one? SoundCloud,
Jake,
yeah. Okay.
Jake doesn't like Google, so I guess that's why we're not on Google, right, Jake? You're
No,
Google.
YouTube. We're on YouTube. YouTube's great.
All
Google
right.
Plus is like is dead already though. They tried it just didn't work out for them. They got search. They got YouTube. They're doing their thing. So.
Well, Jake, Gino, thanks for being our featured guest today. We appreciate it. And for our listeners, be sure to check out jakeandgino.com and Wheelbarrow Profits Podcast. Guys, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks, Brock.
Thanks.
See you later.
See you guys.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Freedom Real Estate Investing Podcast at freedomrealestateinvesting.com. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and give the show a 5-star rating on iTunes today.
This podcast is provided for general information and should not be considered investment, legal, tax, business, or any other professional advice. Any earnings or future earnings are not typical results. You agree that you are hereby fully responsible for the use of this content and hold the presenter, publisher, and company harmless for any and all claims.